Hey, moneymakers, welcome to another episode of Taking Stock Live. And I'm super blonde now, like platinum blonde, whatever you call this color. Trying out a new thing, trying to figure out my signature hairstyle. Let me know. Choking myself up. Let me know what you think in the chat. Should I stick with this color for a while, or go back to the darker color that I had like last week and the week before, or just my natural, like almost jet black color? This is a business show. Why am I asking you about my hair? I don't know, but for some reason I feel like you guys are invested in every aspect of the show, including what I look like. So hey, let me know what you think. But we are here to give you all the latest business news and tell you how it affects you and your money. Now, we've been following the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange for some time, and tonight we're going to talk a little bit more about it because there are some developments there that we are tracking. And then later on in the show, we'll be looking at Sygnus's preference shares. What's the latest with those? So make sure you stay tuned. But before we start, let me know in the chat where you're joining us from, what part of Jamaica or what part of the world, so I can give you a shout out at the start of the show. Also remember to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share with a friend. Tell them that Taking Stock is on and popping. We are live and we are ready to get this money. But first, here's a look at what's coming up in tonight's show, followed by what's hot in business. On this episode of Taking Stock, the SME market of the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange has hit 1 billion TT dollars in value. Plus, TTSE newcomer Medcorp is already paying its first dividend. Is the TTSE primed for a surge? And in Jamaica, Sygnus Credit is looking to extend some of its preference share offers. What does that mean for investors? We'll discuss.
But first, here's What's Hot, brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
The Jamaican government says some 4,000 direct and indirect jobs will be created by the Caymanas Special Economic Zone. The Port Authority of Jamaica broke ground on the 700-acre project last week. Prime Minister Andrew Holness said the project is a major step towards Jamaica becoming a Caribbean shipping and logistics hub. The project will be completed in 3 phases. Phase 1 is expected to be done in 4 years at a cost of 8 billion JMD, or about $50 million US. The zone will have a mix of industries, including agro-processing, pharmaceuticals, BPO, financial technology, and supply chain analytics. Consolidated Bakeries has secured a $600 million loan to boost its production capacity. The company manufactures and distributes the Purity and Miss Birdie food brands. According to a statement, the 10-year loan was secured from Sagicor Bank and will be used in part to refinance existing loans. The company also said it plans to upgrade its plant and improve production efficiencies. Consolidated Bakeries made 1.6 billion Jamaican dollars in revenues in 2024. That's about $10 million US. The United States is now proposing a pilot program that could require business and tourist visa applicants from certain countries to pay a bond of up to $15,000 US to enter the United States. The 12-month program would apply to travelers from countries with high visa overstay rates and weak internal document security. The bond amount could range from $5,000 to $15,000 US, depending on the applicant's profile. That's between $800,000 to $2.4 million Jamaican dollars. The bond is reportedly intended to serve as a safeguard to ensure compliance with visa terms. The program was announced on Monday. It's expected to begin within 15 days of its formal publication. Affected countries will be named once the pilot launches. U.S. President Donald Trump has fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Trump claims the latest job numbers were rigged to make his administration look bad. According to the agency, the U.S. added only 73,000 jobs in July. That's much lower than the forecast of 109,000 new jobs. Economists say the reports indicate that the labor market is deteriorating quickly because of uncertainty caused by Trump's tariffs. However, Trump has dismissed concerns about his tariff plans, which he says will boost U.S. manufacturing and rebalance global trade. If you're ready to level up your money, make sure you get a copy of my brand new Money Mission workbook. Get it at Fontana Pharmacy in Jamaica or worldwide on Amazon.com. Learn how to manage your money, manage your debt, and start investing to create wealth. Let's get this money.
What's Hot was brought to you by JMMB Group, your best interest at heart.
Welcome back. Let me see who is on. David Gray is on the money train tonight. Chairman says greetings to the massive. Who else do we have? Dwight from Spanish Town, still looking to see the turnaround in the stock market, aren't we all? Dwight Scotty says greetings from Kingston. Worrell is checking in from Montego Bay. Antoinette is in Black River. Trying to select Antoinette's comment. Why are you not letting me select Antoinette? All right, sorry. Stronglink says he doesn't like the hairstyle at all. No problem. Ask for your opinions. Antoinette, here we go. Black River in the house. Inga Baby is joining us from Orlando. Jackie is in Kingston 7. We've got Scotty. Okay, Scotty disagrees. 1 vote for the platinum blonde look. Humble Boss is checking in from Negril. Sorry. Chairman says, I would love for Sygnus shareholders to vote on the extension of the Class C shares. We're going to be talking about that later on in the analyst segment. Stronglink says JSE is going to surge after the election. What makes you think that, Stronglink? Do you foresee a change in government? I am DJ Demar is checking in from Helsha. We've got Hugh in Connecticut. We've got Life Roots in Montego Bay. We've got Raquel saying like and Comine. Inga Baby is saying she's sure that Jamaica will be on that list. Unfortunately, I saw an article today from Nationwide Radio saying that Jamaica has the second highest number of overstayers, visa overstayers in the world. So I'm pretty sure Jamaica will be on that list as well. Lucky for me, I have a Belize passport. Oh boy, I need to go get my kids' Belizean passports too, because 15,000 JMD, I ain't about that. Sorry, USD, I ain't about that life. Any Trini viewers in the house tonight? I'd love to hear from my Trini massive, because we are talking about the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange primarily tonight. Why all the technical difficulties? All right, I was logged into my script, and now the thing is telling me I've been signed out and I need to log back in. Do I even remember my password? Let's try this. I think that's it. Yes, all right, good. I'm logged back in. Yeah, so like I was saying, we've been tracking the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange for a couple of years now, and things have been picking up recently. You may have heard about the Medcorp IPO, and there've been a couple of other listings as well. So we wanted to take a look in and see, how it's been doing. And tonight we have Taking Stock analyst David Rose joining us tonight. Welcome back, David.
Night, Kalila. Glad to be on.
All right, so starting with the TTSE first, like I mentioned in the introduction, Medcorp just listed on the market on July 1. They had their IPO May, June, and they've already announced their very first dividend of $1 TT, which is a pretty nice dividend, especially compared to what some Jamaican companies pay. So for those not familiar with Medcorp and who they are, just give us a brief background about the company.
So they operate a private hospital in Trinidad and Tobago and a couple other medical facilities. So just give me a second, let's bring it up. So they offer executive health services. They offer the Brand Hair Cancer Treatment Center and a couple other specialized treatment facilities based in Trinidad and Tobago. So they're planning to expand part of their facilities from the IPO proceeds while benefiting from the proceeds benefiting from the tax exemption that comes with the listing on the TTSE Market. So founded by Dr. Kongshik Achong Low and a couple other major shareholders in 1993, this is officially the 4th TTSME listing, and according to the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, the market capitalization, the combined market capitalization of the SME market has now exceeded 1 billion TTD. Just to give context, that is 123 billion Jamaican dollars, using a rate of 23 to 1.
Is that more than what the Jamaica junior market is valued?
No. So the junior market is around 150 billion Jamaican dollars across, I believe, 48 companies at the moment.
So that's not a billion yet. It's very close though.
Billion TTD on their side. So
billion TT, right.
As I said, 23 billion Jamaican dollars at the translated amount. So this actually is one of the most significant IPOs in their SME market's history. So just to give some quick synopsis of history, 2009, the late Don Obi, may his soul rest in peace, alongside other stakeholders, introduced the junior market in 2009. Active Financial listed, then Lasco, then Honeyball, and so on, and we just saw a flurry of listings. Now, Trinidad said, hey, I like what Jamaica did. Let's do something here about Trinidad. So they formed something called the TTSE Market back in 2011. However, the market interest was basically mute. What do you mean by that? So the first listing for the TTSE market was in November 2018. Remember, for
7 years.
Correct, just for their first listing. At the time, their first listing was a company called Cinema One Limited. And Cinema One Limited only raised TT 14.4 million out of the $30.8 million they were targeting. So they were just slightly below half of the original targeted amount.
Is that the same company that was talking about entering Jamaica?
No, that's not it. So the company referring to is Movietown. There's the company that's in Tobago and Guyana. Cinema One was founded in 2007 or 8 or 9 by Brian and Ingrid Jara and a couple other major private stakeholders. So the Jaras, very experienced individuals, formed Cinema One, grew the business, and they have now expanded through the IPO. They just recently opened a new location at Price Plaza. They're at One Woodbrook Place in Trinidad and Tobago. And if you actually go on Google and look at their Gemstone movie theaters, you're like, wait, what is a palace amusement? So they've really set the bar when it comes on to their offering in Trinidad and Tobago. Then in 2019, there was Endeavor Holdings. However, Endeavor Holdings, which is a real estate holding company, only raised TT $11 million vis-a-vis the $18 million target they had set. The IPO of Solace Marketing last year, August, was the first fully subscribed junior market SME IPO in the entire history. So they raised 11 million TT at a 33 million TT valuation. So think about it for a second. You had Cinema One, you had Endeavor Holdings. Neither reached their target and were both undersubscribed. Solace came to market, got proper take-up. Medcorp had their IPO just last month, but in actually June, and they raised 16.8 million TTD, which translates to 386 million Jamaican dollars, and that's actually the largest raise on the SME market to date on the TTSME market. So really and truly, their market has taken some time to gain more market attention and interest, especially against the backdrop of the Trinidadian domestic situation.
Yeah,
so
and I have noticed that we've been gaining a lot of Trini viewers lately, and that Medcorp IPO video got a lot of attention. So we had a lot of people messaging us about how can they participate in that IPO.
So just to give some further context, let's go back to the SME's founding, right? So whereas the Jamaican junior market said, hey, the first 5 years, you get 100% tax remission, and then you get 50% off the nominal rate for the remaining 5 years. When the TTSME was introduced, it was an entirely different regime. So in Trinidad, their corporation tax, I believe, is 30% as a standard rate, right? So when you listen to the TTSME market, you were taxed at a 10% rate for 5 years, and that was it. So whereas the junior market said, hey, first 5 years you get no tax, you have 100% tax remission, and the remaining 5 years you have a 50% tax remission. TTSE said, well, the Trinidad legislators at the time said you're only going to take a reduced tax rate, not no tax at all together. So around 2019 or 2020, they actually amended their law to say, hey, you're going to get 5 years, 100% tax remission, and now 50% off the normal rate for the remaining 5 years afterwards. So they adjusted their setup to similarly match the Jamaican market. And in late 2024, the Trinidad and Tobago Securities and Exchange Commission approved a rule change by the TTSE, which is stock exchange itself, whereby their rule change was that the threshold move from 70 to 80%, which was the maximum that a shareholder, can own in a company. So, in other words, when a company comes to this on the JSE right now, there has to be at least 20% of the shares owned by at least 100 shareholders for the company to list. In Trinidad, it was 30%. I think it was 100 shareholders, but 30% of the company had to go to other investors when there was a listing. So with this new structure, what happened was that companies could list at a larger valuation without giving up additional equity. So it's basically matched the junior market as well. So whereas we had gotten, a good amount of success over these last, I believe it's 2015, 16 years actually, on the JC junior market, Trinidad is still trying to better optimize their model to, match or set up to kind of see how they can better attract companies to go public.
Mm-hmm.
JSE
And
junior
also to
market,
promote these opportunities better as well. And know that they are doing some work on the PR side to try to promote these opportunities, both to businesses to attract their listing and to the public.
Yeah, so just to kind of flip back a little bit, what I was going to point out was that on the JSE junior market, we've had over 55 companies listed to date, about 6 or 7 graduations to the main market. We've had T-Tech bought out. We have had the buyout by Grace Kennedy for Key Insurance, and we're just having, further succession and growth of these smaller companies, which, are still growing today. Trinidad is now trying to create or stimulate growth in its smaller business category segment to either spur greater domestic growth for these businesses or spur greater growth for their external opportunities that they foresee. So let me give an example. So Movie Town said, hey, you want to come to Jamaica? COVID stopped that. There were issues. I remember speaking to Brian and Ingrid Jara a couple of years ago, and they said, they would have loved to come to Jamaica to actually do some work, in terms of just documenting our culture and, showing it across the region and other markets. So they mentioned Marcus Garvey and this part of Jamaican culture that they'd actually want to, partner on and document and monetize for the greater interest of the Caribbean. So they're just, the markets in Trinidad and Tobago have 3 or 4 movie theaters, but they were still looking to diversify their product range to look at Jamaica to support their growth. So based on the current situation that I mentioned in Tobago, the SME market still represents one of these basic, pillars that they're trying to use to support further growth. But they're still learning to optimize the model for a better experience for all investors, because 10% was the rate they said they were to use for 5 years. They said, hey, this doesn't make no sense. Somebody's coming to the market. Mirror JSE junior market in terms of the tax benefits. Let us adjust the threshold now to 8%. Try and give companies to list at better valuations. And just to give context, over there, you're required to raise between 5 million TT and 50 million TT to go public on the TTSME. So just to give context, that means you have to raise between 115 million and 1.15 billion TT, sorry, you have to raise between And when I say 5 million, so when I say 5 million to 50 million TT, I'm referring to 150 million Jamaican dollars or 1.15 billion Jamaican dollars in capital raised on the market. So there's a larger space or spectrum for companies to actually raise capital. And something that somebody said to me last, which I found very interesting, and might be something, for a future discussion, is a dual cross listing of a company on the TTSME and the JSE junior market. Because one thing people don't seem to realize is that the JSE junior market says that you have to be a CARICOM company, I believe, from the main market rules. I'm not sure if it's in the junior market, but this is one of the possibilities that could exist in the future, especially as regional leaders talk about a Caribbean stock exchange. Whilst there are still some technicalities that we need to be resolved, by the time is considering this whole discussion about this and other markets, it opens up a discussion, because we've seen whereby in Trinidad, Price Trinidad and Tobago is coming to Jamaica to raise 50 million USD. We have massive holdings, and when they came public on our question on JSE Market in January 2022, they said, hey, we're coming to Jamaica because we have growth plans, and Jamaica is forming part of our capital growth strategy to get capital to grow. We had even AS Braden refinancing the tier in Jamaica after the recent TPJ acquisition. So Indian companies are expanding to Jamaica. Some are going to work on our market, others won't. But based on Trinidad's situation right now with the FX issues, you're going to definitely see more cross-regional interest. The companies coming from Trinidad to Jamaica, and companies from Jamaica going to Trinidad to raise capital or to acquire businesses.
I was going to ask you about that actually, because I remember there being these issues with raising capital in Trinidad, and the same thing that you brought up before, and also the issue of the FX situation in Trinidad continuing to affect the way companies are able to both raise money and pay out dividends. And that continues to be a situation that is plaguing Trinidad and Tobago. But yet we have the success of the Medcorp IPO. So I wonder, David, is Medcorp an outlier? So is Medcorp the exception to the rule, or is this the start of a trend of seeing a very active capital market on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange?
So, we currently have 4 Jamaican companies cross-listed in TTSE Exchange: NCB, JMMB, Grace Kennedy. MPC is not Jamaican, they're Barbadian, but they're cross-listed as well. FPCPF is cross-listed as well. Guardian is cross-listed. Maxi is cross-listed. So it's a really good point, because for a company like Medcorp that is raising this large sum of capital that is the largest raise that they've had to date, it does indicate that investors do see potential opportunities in the capital markets, but it's just for these opportunities to match the reality. Because let's read this one for the viewers, right? So let's just say you have $1,000 US in your bank account right now, guys. In Jamaica, go to the bank, you say, I want $1,000 US. The bank says, here you go, sir. Anyway, in Trinidad, go to the bank. They're like, do you have any evidence? Evidence of what? Traveling? What are you doing? I have things to do. But sir, we have an allocation thing right now. So, for instance, told me that they've had to go to the bank, show evidence they're going to travel, and even when they do go to the bank, you probably get only $200 US for the day.
And I know that all too well here in Belize, because we have foreign currency restrictions here as well. So it's a whole lot. You have to get permission from the central bank to get US.
And that's a similar situation in Barbados as well, where you have to actually apply for permission from a central bank of Barbados to get, FX as well. But in Trinidad, they didn't have these kind of extreme issues over probably 5, 6, 7 years ago, but it's gotten so tough in recent times. So you found combination that now forced, based on the relatively harsh environment, to adapt to better environments for growth. So there's this window company, based at Summit right now, out of Trinidad. I believe there's this company out of Trinidad as well that is making ice cream products. They say they want to export to Jamaica, other markets. And we've seen so many companies, even movie town and so on, say they want to expand to Jamaica because growth opportunity realized in Jamaica based on the population size and just the economic climate. So is it going to be the established big players, or are you going to see growth from the smaller players instead? Because I cannot recall the last time when there's been a main market, or I should say a general market listing on the TTSE market from a junior market offering, or should I say SME market listing. So in their case, they do have the government, the Trinidad and Tobago bond listings that are always ongoing, but from the private sector space, it's relatively still private, not seeing as many capital market offerings in the general sphere. So to see, the SME market in this case leading some market interest does speak volumes. And also shouldn't forget the fact that the further cross-regional listings across the markets does create opportunity for persons in countries like Barbados, and Trinidad that have FX constraints to source capital. So
David, let's talk about this proposal. Since we're talking about cross listings and one country taking advantage of markets in another country across the region, there's now a proposal for a Caribbean stock exchange, and it's been endorsed by the CARICOM heads of government. A company has been selected to lead the study, the feasibility study. That company is PricewaterhouseCoopers. And regional stock exchange, though, how feasible is it for there to be a Caribbean stock exchange? Do you think that all of them should just come together so there would be no more JSE, no more TTSE, no more BSE, we just have one Caribbean stock exchange? Or would it be, I don't know, how do you think that could potentially work out?
So let's put it in one simple sentence. If you couldn't get the West Indies Federation right, how are we going to get a Caribbean stock exchange right?
Oh gosh.
I'm not fighting the Caribbean stock exchange. It would be good to have more regional cooperation, but you have to be realistic. Jamaica, Trinidad, and Barbados, based on their economic models and setups, they have deeper capital interests by different investors and so on, so they can sell on their own as relative giants in their own spheres. But for example, in the Eastern Caribbean, they share an Eastern Caribbean dollar. They share an Eastern Caribbean stock market. Go to Guyana, they have a stock market that's only open on Mondays. And that, I don't think it's traded for like maybe 3 hours good, and they have a T+5 settlement period. And on top of that, there are just other considerations that people need to consider, or I should say they, resolve. So the current settlement thing is one thing that needs to be resolved. So if I had a Caribbean stock exchange, how would that settlement work? If I'm buying a stock in Trinidad, would my GMB convert to TTD, or how would that work behind the scenes? Then we also need to look at the regulations not being harmonious. So whereas in Jamaica, a company can do a share buyback very quickly, snap your fingers, Trinidad situation or the delay on the regulatory side has created issues where companies on the JSE, or I should say cross the companies, want to execute on share buyback. So Grace Kennedy and JMB Group took about a year, and GK took several months before their share buyback could actually start. And that was because, whereas in Jamaica, we don't have regulatory constraints to a share buyback, based on Trinidad and Securities law, which is actually their Securities Act, the companies have to apply to the TTSE to get approval to their share buyback. And when that approval does come through, it is so long into the future, because I believe GK announced their buyback proposal early 2023, and it wasn't until late 2023 when they got approval to actually start the program. So whereas if they released on the JSC alone, they could have just started and just got moving. When it came on to the Credit request and TTSE, it became a constraint. So you have a lot of constraints that needs to be resolved. They've been trying in the past, to create this harmonious like structure. So, I believe to 2015, they had the same software. I think it was Avento, or I don't remember the name of the program. They had a similar setup in terms of settlement times at the time. So back then, I believe settlement was T+3. So Barbados, Trinidad, and Jamaica Stock Exchange all try to, harmonize things. But in terms of the actual operation of that regional kind of exchange trade and everything, it didn't really work out as they expected. We've seen companies like JMB Group open a new office in Barbados. They have Trinidad operations. NCB Capital Markets has Cayman, Barbados, Guyana, Trinidad operations. So, different Jamaican firms see opportunity across the region to grow, as brokers and in the capital markets dynamics, but there are just a lot of concerns that, you have to resolve from regulatory standpoint, currency standpoint, and also what I'd call governance concerns, but more, what I'd call the leadership concerns, because Jamaica pulled to West Indies Federation and it collapsed shortly after.
I've been having this debate with a friend of mine for months as well. A friend of mine here in Belize, because I had been trying to drum up interest in possibly developing a Belize stock exchange. This interest is falling on deaf ears. There doesn't seem to be much interest politically in doing something like that, and from the regulatory standpoint. And my friend who I've been talking to, who works in the capital markets, has been saying, no, Belize is too small of a market. What we need is a Caribbean stock exchange. And for many of the reasons that you pointed out tonight, David, I was saying developing a Caribbean stock exchange is going to be problematic. One, because the political will just doesn't seem to be there. The difference is, both of you have the bug, David. The differences with, what was I saying? The differences with the currencies. Yes, the differences between the currencies, the differences between the regulations. It's going to take a lot of effort to really be able to streamline a Caribbean stock exchange. Although I would love to see it happen, because we would love to have opportunities available region-wide. If my company here in Belize wants to raise money, that should be a Caribbean-wide opportunity. That would only deepen regional integration and really bring the CSME a step closer to where we would like to see it. But unfortunately, CSME itself hasn't really taken off and has failed, met so many challenges in implementation over the years.
For me, Kalila, the way I see it is that we need to just be realistic and work with what we have already. Try and improve regulation in each market to make it a little bit more seamless for business to be done in different jurisdictions. Somebody said, they think that their application to the TTSE is still on somebody's desk that had many years ago for, I think, a financial advisor, but a dealer of license in Trinidad, still not resolved. You need to resolve regulatory concerns or delays in each market. And for me, I think we just need to accept that, hey, each of us have our own regional, or I should say domestic constraints. Let us work with what actually makes sense. So Jamaica is already the hot thing everybody's talking about, right? So Belize themselves don't want to develop a stock exchange there. Why not just list on the Jamaican markets? Why don't we just say, hey, we have a junior market, for example. Why don't we say, hey, Belize, how about, you create a law that allows for companies on either the JSE's junior market or the TTSE market, to benefit from a tax break in your home jurisdiction. These companies will still be able to raise capital, carry back home or invest across the Caribbean to grow. Because what are realistic? Trying to create this single stock exchange doesn't make much sense at the moment based on just all of these constraints, because whereas the Eurozone, has the benefit of a single currency and harmonized legislation to make cross-border business very simple, where all these different markets, one different laws, one different political will. Work out what we have. So the TTSE just moved from T+3 to T+2 last year. They might go to T+1 very shortly, like the JSE. So when TTSE, Barbados, and Jamaica on the same testament time, just see how you can facilitate what I'd call faster cross-border settlement of certain cross-asset companies. Because what I want to point out to you was that I must realize persons in Trinidad raise FX in Jamaica through the stock exchanges. So let us say I am a person that wants to get FX in Trinidad. I can buy, let's say, 1,000 Great Canadian shares, right? assembly cost me about 4,000 TT. I can then take that 1,000 shares and do something called an inter-CSD transfer, an inter-central security depository transfer from the TTCD to JCSD. And if I do that, I can sell 1,000 shares on JSD at $70 and get 7,000 JMD and then convert to USD. The fact that you have persons, going through this what I'd call convoluted route just to get FX shows you that persons are willing to take advantage of opportunities to source capital to make profit based on their needs. So let's just improve the settlement period and that harmonization between the markets so that if somebody says, hey, I'm selling JSE and TTSE, how fast can I have my shares settled from Jamaica's JCSD to Trinidad or to BCSD? So you will need to be really scanning this use that we have already and grow with it. I'm not saying Jamaica should be the home of everything, but we're being realistic about what's happening right now. You have new hotels, new infrastructure. You have an open foreign exchange market. You don't have any restrictions at any serious level to raise FX. So for me, just work out what we have.
Yeah, we have a lot of comments on this topic. I'm going to take some of those comments shortly. David, a lot to discuss. I'm very curious to see what PwC comes up with in their feasibility study and what recommendations they make. They didn't have a timeline on it, so I don't know when we can expect this study to be completed, but I will definitely be keeping an eye out. It's time to take a break. It's actually time now for our poll question for the evening. And this poll question, when I heard this story, I was like, US or JMD? So how do you feel about the United States proposing a $5,000 to $15,000 US dollar bond for business and visitor visas? $5,000 to $15,000 US dollars. And this bond would be payable by people from countries that have high rates of overstays on the visitors' visas. And like I was mentioning at the start of the show, Jamaica has, according to Nationwide News, the second highest rate of overstay visas in the world, which means that we are very likely going to be among the countries that are required to pay this $5,000 to $15,000 US dollar bond for business and tourist visas. How do you feel about that? A, that's ridiculous. B, well, it will deter overstaying. C, US visa applications will drop significantly. Or other, leave a comment. What do you think about that? Would you even want to visit the US anymore? You can't better go China or somewhere, because if that's what you have to pay, might as well buy a ticket somewhere further, I guess. So you can leave a comment in the chat. You can take the poll over on the community tab of the YouTube channel or over on X or in tomorrow morning's email. Up next, we've got your market recap, and we've got David standing by for the analysts.
Time now for your market recap, brought to you by MyMoneyJA.com, the official data partner of Money Media. Get 10% off your subscription with the code MONEYMISSION.
The JSE Combined Index fell 2% in July. That's about 8,000 points. 128 stocks traded across the main and junior markets. 48 made gains, 71 lost value, and 9 stayed the same. 1 billion shares changed hands on the Jamaican dollar market, valued at $4.8 billion. Now let's see who had July's biggest gains. ISP Finance climbed 42% to open August at $16.17. JetCon gained 21% to start the month at $1.74. And First Rock Real Estate Investment USD was July's third biggest gainer. The stock gained 19% to start the month at 2 cents US. On the losing side now, NCBFG was last month's biggest loser. It's down 26% to open August at $30.37. Iron Rock Insurance fell 23% to open the new month at $4.60. And Consolidated Bakeries was down 20% to open at $1.25. Over on the Trinidad and Tobago Stock Exchange, the composite index lost 20 points in July. That's 2%. Massey was the most traded stock of the month. It fell 2% to open August at $3.91 TT. Newly listed company Medcorp was the TTSE's biggest gainer, up 10%. It opens the new month at $53 TT. On the losing side, National Enterprises was July's biggest loser, down almost 17%. Over in the U.S., the Dow Jones lost about 1% in July, while the S&P 500 was up 1% and the Nasdaq climbed nearly 3%. It was a rough month at the pumps in July. The price of 87 gas rose $1.58, while 90 gained $1.44. Meanwhile, the cost of regular diesel climbed $6.56, while low-sulfur diesel was up $7.11. In foreign exchange trading, the JMD lost $1.15 against the U.S. dollar in July, closing the month at an average $161.25 to $1 U.S. On the other hand, Jamaica's currency strengthened against the Canadian dollar and the pound. The Canadian dollar closed the month at $116.74, and the JMD gained 30 cents on the pound. The JMD lost $7.50 on the euro. Finally, on the crypto markets, Bitcoin prices were up 5% in the last 30 days, trading at $114,749 on Monday. Meanwhile, Ethereum prices soared 40%, trading at $3,643 on Monday. Market Recap was brought to you by MyMoneyJA, the official data partner of Money Media.
If you want 5 million Jamaican dollars, what would you do with it?
Put it in a fixed deposit.
Fixed deposit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else?
Yeah. Wheel of fortune. Wheel up more money. Get more money accomplishment from Grace Kennedy. Yeah.
So
How
when
is
you say
everything?
Grace Kennedy, you mean like the stocks?
Yeah. Stock up on bully beef and bread. You get you more comfortable.
The views expressed in this segment are not necessarily the views of Money Media. This information is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. Please consult a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decisions.
All right, good night, everyone. This is Sachelle. You're the producer behind this. So we've lost Kalila for a little bit. So I'm gonna bring David back on and start our conversation on Sygnus while Kalila rejoins. So let's welcome back David.
Thanks again, Sachel. So what I was going to point out earlier was that, we saw the disclosure from Sygnus Credit. Oh, Kalila's back.
Yeah, my internet shipped out and now tethered to my phone. I don't know what happened, but it's so it goes. I know you're talking about Sygnus. I wanted to take some comments before we got into that conversation though, because there are a lot of comments about the potential Caribbean stock exchange. But thanks for holding the fort for me, David, and for taking over. So chairman says good news for TTSE. Would love JSE to see a boom now. God knows myself and other investors could use the surge in our stock portfolio. Raquel mentioning checking in pre-independence. Yeah, happy Independence Day tomorrow, Jamaica, when it comes. You guys have a blast in my name. Drink a little something, something. Dwight says he's excited about earnings season. Bringing up all our Trini viewers, including Andrew Shells, saying when people support Jamaicans running off in foreign countries thinking it wouldn't come back on them. Referring to the bond. By the way, so the study said Jamaicans are the second highest overstayers in the Caribbean, not in the world. That's my bad. So second highest visa overstayers in the U.S. amongst Caribbean people. So not in the world like I mentioned earlier. Don is in TNT, so big up yourself, Don. I wanted to take some other comments on the currency issue. Yes, a strong link says different currencies are going to be a big challenge to overcome. Arbitrage confusion. You need one common currency for it to work smoothly. Won't happen in a hurry. Learn, Grow, Invest shares that sentiment. I figure we all would need a central registrar, agree on currency exchanges, and have settlement centralized. Rasheen says having Caribbean Stock Exchange would be good because the liquidity of the JSE is a headache sometimes. Lavaine says that would require a common currency, in my opinion, to eliminate the volatility that would be present. We've got Donovan saying Jamaica doesn't benefit from CARICOM. I've heard those discussions. Shell says, what currency would they use? A Caribbean stock market powered by the USD? Laughing emoji. Rashane again says, why can Europe be so united and tightly knitted so politically and economically, but in the Caribbean we're so divided and are easy pickings for larger nations? And then Ryan says, in a year or two, the JSE is going to buy a few Caribbean stock exchanges. Remember to buy JSE shares before the announcements. I would not be surprised if that happens. I have noted the forums that they have been hosting in Guyana, for example. They have a whole conference, a regional investment conference in Guyana. I think this is going to be the second year that they're doing that. Sean says Caribbean needs a Caribbean currency like the euro, and that is going to be a tough sell. It has been a tough sell. They've been wanting to do it since the CSME, and it has never happened for many reasons. Some have floating exchange rates like Jamaica. Some have fixed exchange rates like Barbados and Belize. Some have technically floating, but in practice fixed exchange rates like Trinidad and Tobago. And I know for the countries that have fixed exchange rates, moving to a floating system is going to be politically an extremely difficult sell if that is what we would move to as a region. I know here that would not fly at all, at all, at all. Anyway, David, let's get into the discussion surrounding Sygnus. I don't know how far you got into the discussion just now, but they are looking to extend their two classes of their preference shares. These shares are set to mature on December 22, but now they want to extend them for 3 years. So what does that mean?
So Sygnus Credit would go to the preference shareholders, the Class C and Class D preference shareholders, and say, hey, we would like to extend our preference share maturity dates and adjust the interest rates, to benefit everybody. So when Sygnus Credit, received the funds from investors back in 2023, there was an agreed 2-year timeline, for investors to get repaid. Now, we're seeing relative tightness in the markets, Jamaican in particular. So what you've seen is that companies have been trying to refinance if the amount is very small, or if it's relatively large, they're just asking for an extension where possible to, benefit themselves instead of just going through this process of going to FSC to register prospectus, this and that. To just ask for an extension and get the approval is relatively cheaper and more efficient depending on the structure. So in this case, Sygnus pref shares could mature in December under the current timeline, right? When Sygnus Credit goes to the pref shareholders in less than 2 or 3 weeks, pref shareholders are going to vote. I'm not sure if it's the Jamaican Securities Act that will be used, or it's going to be based on the St. Lucia's laws. But I know that when JMB extended their preference shares, they required a 75% supermajority to vote in favor, by proxy and in person as well, in terms of the head count, to get the extension of the pref shares and change of terms. So just for context, if the pref shareholders do vote in favor, but it doesn't meet a particular threshold, if there is one, then the terms would remain unchanged and they'd have to pay out on the original December 22 timeline. So they're proposing extension from December 2025 to December 2028. And based on the adjustment in interest rates, they're proposing to adjust the JMD version down from 10.5 to 9.85% and from 8% USD to 7.5% as a new interest rate. So all that would happen is that your pref shares would just have a new maturity date. You could continue to sell them on the JSE if you so please, if these terms are approved. But otherwise, it's just something to watch and see at the moment.
Is this something that companies typically do, or is this an unusual move?
It's relatively unusual when it comes to the last 2 years. So let me say why I said last 2 years in particular. So let's use a JMB, for example, as reference, right? When JMB had pref shares maturing around 2016, 2017 into 18, they would have come to the market, said, hey, we would like to refinance these pref shares and also borrow more capital from the markets. They came to the market, got the money, pay the old preferred shareholders, have new preferred shareholders, and continue to grow. Now, that's what normally happens when it comes to maturing liabilities or liability like asset, mature like liabilities. You come to the market, you go to a bank, whoever, say, hey, I need to refinance this instrument. They give you the money, you're the all investors, and you just move on. Back in January 2024, JMB would have extended 2 of the preference shares to 2030, and just earlier this year in March, they would have extended the preference shares to 2031 and 2032. Now, the choice of coming to ask for an extension, it is more amenable and cheaper from the perspective of, just getting consent of preference shareholders. But at the same time, one of the constraints that you do think about when you sit back and look at it is the money that they're not paying out by this extended preference shares doesn't enter by the capital markets. So, in other words, if $1 billion was coming into capital markets, to investors putting other asset classes, that money doesn't come back. And for further context, JMB, sought to what I'd call address the concerns of some preference shareholders who wanted the capital back. Because remember, when JMB sent the preference share maturity timeline, or should I say the preference shareholders approved the extension timelines, if I was expecting to get money in January 2024, that time would have been pushed back. So I'd have had to go and sell on the market, potentially at the maturity price of $1 in this case, if all went well, and got away. But what JMB did for the last 2 preferential extensions is that they created an order book matching persons who wanted to exit the preference shares and those who wanted to buy into the preference shares. So some persons were at its advantage, and in some instances, for about one of the preference share extensions, they actually waived their commission fee for the transaction. So it was even lower cost for investors to exit that kind of scenario, while for investors to buy into those preference shares for those who want to exit. But we have seen Epley, you've seen PBS, have maturity preference shares and issue new preference shares. That's natural structure, natural methodology. We've seen, and in this case, we're seeing JMB and Sygnus take the route of asking for an extension request to their preference shareholders.
But it happens, though. I mean, it's not something that happens often, but it happens. It's a part of the market. Sometimes you need to extend those offers. It happens with bonds as well.
No, that's perfectly fine, Kalila, but when you're seeing more companies, in this case, asking for extension requests rather than actually going to the market to refinance, it can potentially indicate to you that the markets are potentially probably more pricey in one sense. At the same time, at least when you go to the preferred holders, or in this case, your bond holders, and say, hey, how about we extend and give you better terms, you might probably pay more interest cost in the short term, but you probably can refinance in the future period at better terms. Because let's use JB, for example, right? Their preferred share that matured, the USL one that matured back in March of this year, or sorry, there was a post mature in March of this year. It was usually priced at 5.75% USD, right? When they extended their preference share, it became 7.5% as a new rate. So JMB ended up paying more in interest cost to its preference shareholders to get that extension. So that additional duration or time or maturity, it came with a significant additional cost. You didn't have to go to the market to, refinance. At the same time, you didn't have to try and, go and figure out where money going to come from, but you had to pay additional costs in the relative short term until you think things are a little more stable for you to refinance at better terms. And I don't recall, these preference shares having what I want to call early termination like clauses, like in a bond. So, for example, some bonds allow for you to redeem the bond in, let's say, a bond is for 5 years, right? Some bonds have a feature whereby you can redeem that bond in year 4, year 5 at no penalty, basically. So when JMB preferred was extending preference share to 2030 or 2031, it's just locked at that rate on the USL side, And on the JMB side, those preferred are variable rates. So as rates come down, they get the benefits on the JMB side, but on the USL side, where most of the per share value is, they're locked as a higher rate and paying more interest expense in a sense for the foreseeable future until that maturity time comes around again.
But David, we're also in a situation where interest rates are trending down.
They're trending down, but in the capital markets, are you going to get the desired rates you want and at what cost? So let me read a little further. Let us say Sygnus Credit other guys to go to market and try to refinance. Are they going to get the proposed rates that they're proposing to per shareholders right now, or are they going to still be priced at a relatively high rate? So interest rates are coming down, Kalila, but there's still a lag in terms of when rates have to come down and when that's reflected in certain asset classes at the same time. So first, as I mentioned it, when interest are going up, banks and everybody was repricing their cost of interest very fast. But as rates come down, there's a relative lag between, when those higher interest costs are passed on to, in this case, issuers like Sygnus or JMB, and also to the general public like borrowers. So some banks start to reduce their rates, but you're not seeing a significant pass-through effect as yet, because 7% to 5.75% is on the JMD side for Jamaica, but we've only seen the US Federal Reserve go from 5.25 to 5.5% to just 4.25 to 4.5% for their policy rate. So yes, we're trending down, but that pass-through is still relatively not as impactful. At the same time, some of these companies are saying, hey, based on what we see, it's better we have a new facility or structure that benefits us to refinance very quickly or easily, because even VM Investments Limited recent bond IPO, right? They talked about 57% of that bond IPO was just persons saying, hey, we agree to transfer our interest in the old maturing bond into this new publicly listed bond. So more than half of the value of that bond did not come from new money. It was this person saying, hey, we're going to move our interest from this old debt facility or debt instrument into this new debt instrument. So I'm not saying the capital markets are dry. That's not the case at all. But the fact that you're seeing more companies maneuvers or structures by either asking for extensions or moving the debt into publicly listed notes, and that's a bad thing. You get greater market participation, but it does potentially indicate to you that there is still some relatively high interest costs in the general marketplace for certain investors.
O'Shane makes the point, I believe, agreeing with you. The new terms may not be favorable for some investors. At 10.5% dividend, I could pay my bills, but at 9%, not so much. So we have to see how the market responds when this does indeed come to market. I have a couple other comments that I wanted to highlight as well. Where did they go? I'm having some difficulty with my internet today. I remember one of them. Where it gone? I can't find it again. Lost the comment. So I guess I'll look for it during the break and then, come back and wrap with those final comments. But thanks for the discussion once again on your analysis, David. Always appreciated.
Take it easy.
All right, we'll take our final break and come back with more.
The views expressed in this segment are not necessarily the views of Money Media. This information is for educational purposes only and is not intended as financial advice. Please consult a licensed financial advisor before making any investment decisions.
If you won $5 million Jamaican dollars, what would you do with it?
Put it in a fixed deposit.
Fixed deposit?
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else?
Yeah. Wheel of fortune. Wheel up more money. Get more money accomplishment from Grace Kennedy. Yeah.
So
Always everything.
Grace Kennedy, you like the stocks?
Yeah. Stock up on bully beef and bread. You get you more comfortable.
All right, I found the comment that I was looking for. Roswell said extension on bonds and extension on preference shares. That's why I buy stock I can sell without waiting on any extension. And then Stronglink made the point, you can trade bonds too, also preference shares. You don't necessarily have to wait until maturity. So I just wanted to highlight those two comments, as well as some others. So we had some other comments throughout the show. Stronglink said, I remember those days in Jamaica, dollar restrictions. I remember them quite well as well. Lavaine says, looks like after my visa expires, I won't be going to the US. Sherwayne says, A, not happening. So this was in response to the poll question, and our poll question was about this new visa bond fee. How do you feel about the US proposing a 5 to 15,000 US dollar bond for business and tourist visas? A, that's ridiculous. B, it will deter overstaying. C, US visa applications will drop significantly. Or other, leave a comment. And so Sherwayne says, A, not happening. That's ridiculous. The D says, other, they can keep the visa because I'm not paying it. Shane Sage says, A, that's ridiculous. Donovan says, Jamaicans need to focus on Jamaica. Oh, Stronglink says, time zone differences may also be a limiting factor for a CSC, a Caribbean Stock Exchange. O'Shane says, Cygnus preference share extension suggestion is disappointing. I need to send my vote of disapproval. Shells wants to know, do you get back the bond upon leaving the US? And even so, that won't deter people who plan to overstay. What they need to have is visa by invitation only and hold the people who is inviting them to pay yearly. Roswell says, we need millions of persons trading on the JSE, and we don't have enough Jamaicans investing or taking it seriously. Most of the JSE accounts are not active players in buying. Shells again. I want to say B. What was B again? It will deter overstaying. But how will it actually stop people who want to overstay from doing it? They would simply pay the money, get the visa, then overstay. The problem is not solved. I think Shells, anybody who can afford 15,000 USD is doing pretty well in Jamaica for themselves and probably wouldn't take that route of overstaying on a visa to begin with. They probably would go through the appropriate channels anyway. So it filters out a certain set of people by default because they won't even be able to afford the 15,000 US dollar bond to begin with. Stronglink says Haiti is the first by far, saying that's replying to the comment that Jamaica is the Caribbean country with the second highest number of visa overstayers. Learn, Grow, Invest says, I suspect it will be fully taken up, responding to the Cygnus preference shares being extended. And they say 9% is still considered attractive, especially with companies paying 1% dividends on the JSE. Okay, good point, Learn, Grow, Invest. Roswell says, oh, I read that comment already. And then D says, correct, if you can afford the 15K USD, they're very unlikely to run off. That's my point as well. And Chairman says, love the new ad. It's actually old. I think I did that last year. Stock up on Bully Brief and Bread. Yeah. So that is our show for this evening. Thank you so much for tuning in yet another week. It has been my pleasure hosting you live and direct all the way from Belize for the summer up until the end of August. And then I come back and, we do our usual thing. And there may be some changes in September, some very interesting changes coming up. Can't really let the cat out of the bag just yet, but just giving you a little hint, a little slight heads up about some changes coming to Taking Stock and Money Media. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in to the show every single week, reminding you to like the video, share with a friend, pick up your copy of the Money Mission Workbook. Oh, I have background blur on, so you're not really seeing it properly. But yeah, pick up your copy of the Money Mission Workbook. We need a restock in Fontana. I know they're running low on supplies in Fontana, but you can always get your copy on Amazon.com as well. Just type in Money Mission Workbook, you will find it, or type in my name, you will find it. Get your copy of the workbook. Today, we cover investing in detail. We cover managing debt. We help you through creating your financial plan. Get your copy of the Money Mission Workbook today. Tell a friend about Taking Stock because investing is the new sexy. So let's make it cool to talk about money I'm your host, Kalila Enriquez Reynolds. I'll see you again next week.